Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Bede. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to actually, we're going to talk about what Swami Dayananda means by being wise.
That sounds interesting.
Well, what happens is that a lot of times when people think of someone being wise, they think it's someone who knows a lot about something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But why it's important to understand what it means to be wise is that the whole purpose of Vedanta is to bring about a person who is wise.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about moksha, we're not talking about some future event that's going to happen to us in which we're going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. So when we talk about moksha or we talk about freedom, it is not different from being wise. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to read something from Swami Dayananda's Bhagavad Gita home study course at the end, chapter 2, on what is a wise man.
What page?
316.
Yeah.
So he's talking about a wise person.
Mm-hmm.
Such a person is happy with oneself, in himself or herself. The wise person is happy. Everyone is happy in oneself anyway, but always because of something else. Here, without any external props or circumstances, without expecting or depending upon any condition whatsoever, the person is happy.
Mm-hmm.
The analogy of a sugar crystal is useful here. Simply by being a sugar crystal, the sugar crystal is sweet. It does not require a sweetening agent to be sweet because it is already saturated with sweetness, which is why it is a sugar crystal. Therefore, it cannot be sweetened further. Similarly, one is happy, does not depend on any other object or situation to be happy. By one's own awakening to oneself alone, one is happy. And this is what Swami Dayananda means by being wise.
Mm. That's interesting.
Yes, because what this means, and it's extremely important to know, well, what are we doing in Vedanta? Like, what does it mean? So this whole question of how can I be happy with myself, at home with myself, while living, and to actually come to a recognition of what that means.
Yeah.
This is the whole purpose of Vedanta.
Yeah.
But it's not good enough just simply to come to a recognition of what does it mean to be myself while living.
Mm.
I have to, once I've recognized what it means to be me in the fullest sense of the word, or even relatively speaking what it means to me, I then have to abide in the appreciation of what has been recognized while living.
Yes, I understand.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, so just so that we're clear here is that we're not trying to study Vedanta. What our whole effort is involved in is coming to a recognition of what it means to be ourself, and then being ourselves while living. This is the definition of moksha.
Being ourselves while living, being at home with ourselves while living.
You see, when we look at you see, what's interesting about Swami Dayananda's psychological teaching is that unlike other people, when we look at our condition, we find that we are, first of all, constantly changing, aren't we? I'm happy one moment, sad the next, anxious the next, preoccupied the next, confused the next, elated one moment. There's no sameness.
No.
There's a,
We're sort of being determined by our circumstances.
yes, but just in the terms of we're always being shaken.
Yes.
So there's no stability. There's no sense of, there's no being secure.
Mm.
There's just this chopping and changing. It's like a kaleidoscope. So when I'm being angry, that is vastly different from when I am being, it's vastly different from when I'm being lonely,
Mm-hmm.
or when I'm being confused.
Mm.
Are you with me? So one moment I am this,
Yeah.
the next moment I'm something entirely different.
Mm.
And then the next moment I'm something entirely different from that.
Yeah.
So psychologically, we are always tend to be insecure.
Mm-hmm.
There's no stability. That's one thing when I was younger, before Vedanta, I just wondered why it was that I was so chopping and changing, that there seemed to be no place where I could be secure.
Mm. Mm.
So there was this, so what characterizes our psychology as human beings is this insecurity, first of all.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, so there's no sameness. That's the first characteristic.
Yeah.
And secondly, what happens is, of course, is that we have all these various forms of unhappiness.
Mm.
Now, Swami Dayananda actually showed what this unhappiness is. He called it self-dissatisfaction. In other words, I'm being a self and I hate it.
Mm.
So
we don't normally see it like that. Normally we see that I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm lonely. But in the end, that's all me not being happy with the way I am.
quite. Now that's exactly right. So he boiled everything down to here I am. I'm not being happy with what I am.
Mm.
You see, and this covers entirely every form of human unhappiness.
Every form of psychological suffering.
Every form of psychological suffering. Everything, all in the textbooks that we learn and study, it's all covered. But more importantly, he said that he said there were two things. There was insecurity, chopping and changing all the time.
Mm.
And there's being self-dissatisfied, being unhappy with myself, not being at home with myself.
Mm. Mm.
And this is centered on me.
Yeah.
It's not, my mind isn't saying to me, I'm unhappy with myself.
No.
I've
heard that. I have heard that expression that my mind is angry or my mind isn't happy. But when I look at it, my mind has never said to me, I'm unhappy. It's me that says I am unhappy.
When I blame the mind, I'm removing I'm objectifying the problem and removing it from myself, and I become a victim.
Mm. The same as when you're blaming a situation or another person for your suffering.
It doesn't matter.
No, it's the wrong.
And you see, this was one of the most profoundest things that he taught me, was that this problem that exists with me. I am literally the problem.
Mm.
It's not, but he clarified the nature of my problem. I am being insecure. One thing, one moment, one thing. I'm constantly shakeable. Something happens and suddenly I'm like this, and then something else happens and suddenly I'm like this. There's no stability.
Yeah.
And secondly, I've had various forms of psychological misery, anxiety, depression. I mean, I was never really one of these cool, calm, collected types. You know, I was quite thoroughly understood that I was unhappy a lot of the time, but I just didn't understand what it was or the exact nature of it.
Mm.
And here was this Hindu monk who really clearly showed me what my condition actually is, the actual location of it and the nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the location was that this unhappiness that I was suffering from, I was being this unhappiness.
Which is a way of saying.
Yes, yeah, but I don't go into that at the moment. So I was being insecure, and I was being self-dissatisfied.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that we have to understand. Now, let's just juxtapose that. You know, juxtaposition means you put something alongside another. In Vedanta, we put things, we put the contraries together so we can see them clearer. We now contrast this with being wise. Now, this means that if at any one moment, if I could appreciate myself as secure and at home with myself, what happens to my so-called problem, the psychological problem of insecurity and self-dissatisfaction?
They disappear.
Now, that's the whole point. You see, and this has nothing to do with me saying to myself, I'm the self, I'm consciousness, I'm awareness, and all that nonsense. What we're talking about is that if I come to appreciate myself, recognize and appreciate myself as secure, and appreciating myself that I'm at home with myself. I'm appreciating myself and I am at being at home with myself. This and this alone is the remedy for this unhappiness and insecurity.
Yeah.
I found this, to tell you the truth, extraordinary. Because I always thought that I had these different things happening to me. I felt insecurity was happening to me.
The world was hurting you in the form of situations and people.
And my mind, you see, I thought my mental states were happening to me. So I felt that my problem was anger, and my problem was depression, and my problem was anxiety, as well as other people, because they were also making this happen. Okay, so we have to be very, very clear. So what we're seeking in Vedanta is a recognition of ourselves in which we discover ourselves to be secure and be at home with ourselves because of ourselves.
So there's a certain that's a freedom when you're not being determined by circumstances.
Well, that's a very good point. You see, the thing that Freud pointed out, and a lot of these people pointed out, is that if you say something to me and suddenly I'm unhappy, I'm being determined by what you're doing. The condition I'm in is being determined by somebody or something from the outside, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's not freedom, is it?
No.
That's what being determined means. But what he's talking about is this self-shining, being ourselves, and in that being ourselves, we are at home with ourselves, and that we are secure. We're not shakeable. We're not shakeable. and this is extremely important because this is the only solution to insecurity and self-dissatisfaction, obviously. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, now, but then the question comes about, now, how do we approach this? How do we, you see, so what's extremely important is that we have all our lives had the experience of ourselves being insecure and being self-dissatisfied. So, and what he says is that we have to first of all come to appreciate ourselves in an entirely different way, that is the absolute freedom in relative form.
Absolute freedom in relative forms means that it's not unshakable, but there is freedom in this.
What he's talking about is that psychologically, as an individual, we have to come to an appreciation of ourselves as secure and at home with ourselves. This has to happen first.
Yeah.
This is not the absolute freedom, it's the relative freedom. He actually, the way he describes it is he says it's like being an adjective before a noun. So you notice how I can describe myself. I'm feeling secure. So it's an attribute, isn't it? It's a quality. I have a quality of being secure, and I have a quality of being at home with myself. And he said, for example, that you have to first of all understand what being peaceful is before you can own up to yourself as peace itself. We have to understand what the quality of being secure before we can understand that we are the very security we're seeking. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, so what he's saying is that there has to be a psychological transformation of the individual. So here's the individual. He's constantly chopping and changing, insecure, and constantly self-dissatisfied and having this hankering to try and be happy. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is where Swami Dayananda's teachings of Ishvara comes in. Because once, as we've discussed in the previous talks, if someone's listening to this talk and they haven't listened to the previous ones, particularly What is God, they should do so now before they go on.
Yeah.
So what happens is that when we become aware of the presence of Ishvara in the form that he is in, we find ourselves being secure and being at home with ourselves. Now, this is extremely interesting because, you see, before Vedanta, I used to try to be secure, and I try to be accepting, and I try to.
Everyone wants to be happy all the time.
Yes, but I was making various efforts to try and work out how can I, basically I didn't really know, but I was wanting to be at home with myself, but I didn't know what that depended upon. And what Swami Dayananda has revealed in his teaching is this extraordinary psychological fact. And it's this, that when you fully accept Ishvara into your life as he is, in other words, when there is no resistance to facts, when you are receiving what is into your life, the presence of what is into your life, without resistance, in other words, when you accept Ishvara in whatever form he's appearing, cars, trees, people, events, you suddenly appreciate yourself as acceptable. So you didn't do anything to yourself to do this.
Which is
You didn't.
that's the most common approach. Was you're saying that for myself to be acceptable, first I have to. It's dependent on finding Ishvara acceptable.
In order for me to appreciate myself as acceptable, I have to have Ishvara in my life. I have to be receiving Ishvara into my life as he is.
Mm.
So it's through accepting Ishvara, I find myself acceptable.
Mm.
So that's what it depends upon. Which, of course, if you don't know what Ishvara is, if you haven't recognized through the teaching, recognize what God is, then you can't abide in the appreciation of the presence of God.
No.
But when you are abiding in the appreciation of the presence of God, you find yourself being acceptable. So the presence of God appreciated is the transformative factor. You've done nothing to fix yourself up. But because here you are, your mind is filled with the presence of the given, which then what happens is, of course, you see, this is what's very interesting. When we look at all of this, our psychological reactions, all of our what Swami Dayananda calls, subjectivity.
Yeah.
It's like looking at a snake instead of a rope. It's like a mirage. It's like a mirage. What we're seeing is it only belongs to us. It's a construction, an automatic construction. We don't put it in us. We're in this subjective condition.
We take it for real, that subjectivity.
We completely take it for real, like the rope, like the snake. Yes, I'm looking at a snake. And
we're not doubting that whole.
We can't doubt that.
No.
We're helpless. We cannot doubt our subjectivity. When we're looking at a snake, as far as we're concerned, we're looking at a snake. When we're looking at ourselves and thinking we're hopeless, we're pathetic, that's the reality we have. When we look at other people, they're horrible, they're terrible. That's also subjective views. The world sucks. It's a horrible place.
And you can't really understand subjectivity until you know it.
Yeah, but I don't want to go into that now, Kevin. But can we just say, so what happens is we're caught in this condition of subjectivity. And it's the problem with being enclosed in subjectivity is that you can't get out of it from it.
No.
I mean, because it's not real, because it's a delusion. It's like you're hypnotized into being in a jail, and now you're trying to climb the walls to get out. It's just not possible to get out by our own effort or our own thinking. It's just impossible. It's a mirage that we take to be true.
Yeah.
Now, then what happens is we come across Vedanta and we come across Swami Dayananda's teaching on what God is. And what happens is that we're ceasing to struggle. We're just simply, we have a recognition that the very presence of the given that's here, the computer, the air, the sound of cars in the distance, the light, the very presence of the given is the presence of the giver. And when we're abiding in the appreciation of that presence, our minds, well, they're always full of the presence anyway, but it's not appreciated. The presence of God is always abiding. It's always here. But when it's appreciated, it's as though our mind is filled up with the presence of the given alone. And this is what sweeps away the mirage. It just sweeps it away. We've done nothing.
No. You find yourself as a conscious being, and the mind actually becomes quiet.
We appreciate ourselves in an entirely different way. We're not ego inflated. Oh, I'm feeling so good about myself. I'm certainly very spiritual and magnificent right now. There's none of that. There's no ego inflation. There's no ego deflation. There is just simply this being at home with ourself and being secure in that being at home with ourselves. We clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, isn't it interesting that this is like the forerunner of being wise, isn't it? Okay. So here we are, psychologically, as an individual, we are being secure.
Yeah.
And we are being at home with ourselves. So there is a resolution of our psychological misery.
Yeah.
Okay? And also bear in mind that when this is an attitude, being secure and being at home with ourselves is an attitude. Now, as I've said to you before, I was very interested in what Swami Dayananda meant by attitude. I knew I wasn't getting it, and I couldn't wait to sit down with him and ask him, what do you mean by attitude? And we had a very interesting discussion about this. But what an attitude is, it's I'm an individual living in the world. Okay?
Yeah.
And this individual that I am is always in an attitude. It's the psychophysical totality that I am. Okay, so if I'm angry, what Swami Dayananda says, when you're in an attitude, that is the individual. It pervades the individual. So when I'm angry, every aspect of me is manifesting that anger. The tone of voice, the facial expression, the way I am being. It's the way I am being.
And that means the way you are seeing.
Yes, but I just want at the moment, the thing is that the way I am being is the attitude.
Yes.
So when we are being secure and being at home with ourselves, likewise, this is an attitude.
And you're no longer going to be seeking happiness in people, places, and things.
You are freed from this, because you see, now this is a very interesting point you bring up. The only reason why things become so attractive, we have a passion for things, is we believe that they're going to make us feel okay with ourselves. So this is what Swami Dayananda means by neutralizing desires.
Binding desires.
Binding desires. So what happens is that if I'm feeling at home with myself, then I'm not hankering for something to make me feel at home with myself, am I?
No.
So this is the only solution to what he calls neutralizing these binding desires, rendering them, neutralizing them, so they no longer have force. There's no other solution to this. You can know all about binding desires. When I studied psychology, I knew about the whole thing about ego defenses and all of that stuff. I found that very, very interesting. But that never released me from the necessity for an ego defense. Because you see, the defensiveness of human life is that because I'm miserable in myself, I'm trying to be something in my own eyes that's magnificent. Then, of course, I have to defend it, because this is protecting me against this deep sense of insecurity and self-dissatisfaction. So I can read books about it, I can study it and do all of this stuff. But the only solution to this fundamental anxiety, this desperate need to defend myself, is when I am being secure in myself and being at home with myself. So we're clear so far?
Yeah.
Now, Swami Dayananda then has a very interesting thing to say. He says that we need, first of all, wisdom. Okay? Now, wisdom is not something that theoretical. It's when I've recognized Ishvara and I've come to an appreciation of myself as being secure and being at home with myself, that to Swami Dayananda is wisdom. The very fact that I can recognize it. But he said you need two things. He said, first of all, you need the wisdom, but secondly, you need to live the wisdom. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
You see, so the knowledge, the recognition, is only really the first part. We then need to live this wisdom. And in this case, it means we need to live being secure and being at home with ourselves while living.
And by living, you're meaning what we're doing, what situations we're relating to in the form of people and situations, everything.
Yes, he talks about the necessity the devotee must pervade all the roles. But you see, what I noticed was this. You see, when I first come to this recognition of what it means to be relaxed in the lap of Ishvara, it was a profound thing for me, a discovery. Because you see, now I had a place to be at home. I had a place to come back to. Does that make sense? Before that, I didn't.
Yeah.
There was no place to go. Now, what I found was very interesting was this. I would go for walks and I would just I'd be walking along and I'd be being in the lap of Ishvara, in other words, being secure and being myself while I was walking. Okay, so here I was engaging in the action of walking, but I was walking with this attitude. So therefore I was living the attitude. Now I found this very interesting.
Because people I've had an experience, I think it's quite common, where you can think yourself quite peaceful when you're listening to a teacher or what you might regard as a conducive situation. But as soon as you leave that, well, that's all lost. But you're talking about where you've come in through an understanding, you come into relation to what it means to be resting in the lap of Ishvara, and then doing activities from that.
Now that's a very good thing, from that. You see, normally my condition would have been, I'm doing one thing, but I'm thinking and feeling another. You see, so me as a thinker and me as a doer were always split.
Yes.
Does this make sense? So what would happen would be, I remember very vividly once I was very upset with someone for ripping me off for about $5,000.
Yeah.
And what I was doing, I was sitting in the chair, and I was just full of this, ruminating and thinking. Ruminating means thinking about it a lot, and I thought that I was, thinking and all of this sort of stuff. Right now, so here I was upset, and I was caught in. I was literally being my thoughts and my feelings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, what Swami Dayananda says is that when we're not alive to facts, we're not living, actually. So here I was sitting in the chair. I wasn't aware that I was sitting in the chair. I wasn't aware of what I was doing, because what I was actually doing was sitting in the chair. What happened was I was sitting in the chair, but I was caught up in my own mind. So I was doing one thing and thinking and feeling another. Does that make sense? I was split as a person.
you were your thoughts and feelings at that
Mm-hmm.
point. Mm.
And then suddenly, because I've been practicing living, that resting in the lap of Isha, being relaxed in the lap of Ishvara while living, suddenly I snap back into just simply living, being secure and being at home with myself while I was sitting in the chair. Now, guess what happened when that happened?
All the frustration, agitation disappeared.
The mirage disappears, and I find myself a simple conscious person who is sitting in the chair.
Mm. You still didn't like what the person had done.
But that's right.
Being
But,
the agitation and
yes, it's not that I become, I'm glad that they ripped me off.
no.
But it was just simply, I was no longer being the unhappiness.
Mm.
Does that make sense? And I found that quite an extraordinary event. So
Mm.
here I was just simply sitting in the chair.
Mm.
And I also found in the mornings, because I'd go for walks and I'd become very familiar with this attitude, particularly when I was in India, while I was walking.
Mm.
And then I'd find that I could, I'd just be waking up in the morning and I'd just be lying in bed. And I would just simply, while I was lying in bed, I was just being this attitude while lying in bed.
Mm.
I was resting in the lap of Ishvara while I was simply lying in bed.
Mm. Mm.
And it became very simple. Do you know what I mean? It was just simply, I was living my life. Now when we look at the word living, it's the verb, isn't it?
Yeah.
So living is what we're actually doing.
Mm. Mm.
But here what happens is we bring this attitude to that living.
Mm.
And so what happens is that we're now living the wisdom.
Mm.
We're not, one day in the future I'm going to be happy.
Mm. Mm.
What we're doing is we're actually practicing, it's probably a bad word there, but we're living the wisdom. In other words, we know what it means to rest in the lap of Ishvara. We've come to a recognition of what that means.
Mm.
We know we're now very familiar with the attitude of being secure and being at home with ourselves.
Mm.
We now are living that.
Mm.
And this is exceedingly important because, you see, we need to be established in this wisdom.
Mm.
And the thing is that our whole endeavor in Vedanta is to come to a recognition of ourselves as we are, because there's the psychological transformation, which is the transformation of attitude,
which is what we're talking about.
We're also told of and it's not a transformation, it's waking up to what we are. And it's the ontological recognition, it's the recognition of being, the recognition that being, which everything is, we are. But you see, what's important in terms of our practice is that we have to bring it to our life. We have to live what we understand. Otherwise, Vedanta is of no use.
No.
And so, what happens is, which I find very interesting. Here I am. I wake up and I'm lying in bed, and I find myself simply resting in the lap of Ishvara while I am lying in bed. And then I get up and then I go to the bathroom. So as I'm moving to the bathroom, I am moving from this attitude. So that I'm what Swami Dayananda calls being alive to facts. or suddenly I might be struck with cold and go, oh God, I hate this, I can't stand this. Suddenly, I'm no longer being wise. I'm being what Swami Dayananda calls otherwise. Do you see what I mean now?
Yeah.
But what's interesting here is that we need to live. You see, the practice of karma yoga is remaining the same.
Which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, remaining the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And you see, the important part with this is that this becomes our interest. We understand that this is our solution. So once we understand that our solution is to be secure and to be at home with ourselves while living, whenever we notice that we've suddenly ceased to be that way, we then now for the first time we're seeing what our problem really is. It's not my wife, it's not the cold morning. It's that I have ceased to be myself. That's my problem. And then, so what that enables me, because my whole interest is being free while living. They've got this really complicated. It's a very. It took ages for me to learn how to say it. It's a Sanskrit term. It's called Purushartha Nischaya. And what it is that we have to be clear on our end. We have to be completely clear. What are we living this life for? Now, normally we live our life for sex, for power, for excitement, for achievement. You know, we've all got various reasons for living this life for.
But some doing thing that we think will be a good look in, an ego inflation.
Whatever, yeah. Now, but what happens is that once we are living our life, the reason that we are living our life is the whole purpose of our life becomes being free while living. This is the whole purpose. This is not something one day in the future I'm going to be free while living. This is a commitment to being free while living. Now, why this is so important is this brings about a context shift. Now, remember when we've talked about the fact that I said to you that context determines meaning?
Yeah.
So what happens is that we gave the example of if I said to you that the man ripped open the person's belly with a knife, and the person, that sounds very violent, doesn't it?
Yes.
But if I said to you that he's a young surgeon under enemy fire doing a life-saving operation, the whole meaning changes, doesn't it?
Yes. The context changes the meaning.
The context. Now,
determines the meaning.
Yeah. Now, the thing is that unless there's a shift in context in our life, if the context remains the same, if the context of my life is becoming good, becoming, important, becoming somebody, like whatever it is, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then that's going to determine, being liked, being approved of, that determines how I see. The meaning of my experiences can't help but fit in with the context that I'm in. Now, what's interesting about this Purushartha Nischaya, which is to be clear on what am I living this life for, is that this enables me to see the right meaning of my experiences. Can I give you an example of this?
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm living the wisdom. So here I am. I'm going there. I'm cleaning. I'm cleaning my teeth, right?
Yeah.
And I'm cleaning my teeth with this attitude. I'm being secure in myself and being at home with myself. And then I go into the kitchen. Do you know what I mean? And I turn on the kettle, right?
Yeah.
and then suddenly I burn myself accidentally.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I go, ah! Suddenly I'm no longer at home with myself. I'm upset, right? Okay, and the thing is that so the meaning of my experience is that I am unhappy now because I burnt my finger. Now, that's a meaning, isn't it?
Yeah.
The question is whether it's the right meaning. Am I seeing my suffering in the right light? Of course, I'm not. Because in the context of Purushata Nischaya, in the context of this being definite, yes, my entire purpose of being here is to learn about and to come to know what it means to be myself while living, to be free while living. This is the definition of moksha. Suddenly I recognize, oh, I'm not being free. So I'm recognizing that my psychological suffering, my pain, I've still got a burnt finger, but my suffering about it is that I have ceased to be myself. I've become my suffering. I've become something other than myself. I've become what Swami Dayananda calls otherwise. So instead of being wise, I've become otherwise. Or let's say you're driving down the road. So here I am, I'm driving down the road and I'm performing this action with proper attitude. I'm driving, I'm in the attitude of resting in the lap of Ishvara, so I'm a conscious doer in the lap of Ishvara. Okay?
Yeah.
And but the important part is that while I'm driving, I'm knowingly abiding in the lap of Ishvara. Does that make sense? Like once you understand the wisdom, you have to knowingly live the wisdom.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it knowingly. So here I am. I'm driving and then I'm coming around the bend and suddenly there's all of this traffic and I go, oh, for God's sake, all this bloody traffic. Right? I feel that I'm being annoyed by the traffic. That's my experience. So the meaning I'm giving to that experience, because I have this binding desire that life should fit in with exactly the way I want it to be. In other words, be able to,
be happy.
But also in order for me to be happy, the roads have to be smooth and there's no accumulation of traffic. Well, good luck on that desire in Sydney.
Yeah.
So what happens is suddenly I'm feeling unhappy. And it seems like it's been caused by the cars. But suddenly I come to my senses. Now I see that, my problem is not the cars. I have ceased to be secure and I've ceased to be at home with myself. This is my problem. So this understanding of what we're doing in Vedanta causes a context shift so that we can actually see the meaning of our experience in the right light. But
just back to that example of driving and you're saying you're resting.
Could you talk up a bit louder, Kevin?
Sure. Just back to your example about resting in the lap of Ishvara as you're driving. Then you can't turn the corner and suddenly that's actually lost that abiding at that moment when you find yourself annoyed with the traffic.
I'm no longer remaining the same. I've shifted. Yes.
Yes. And then for whatever reason, through grace or because you are committed to practicing being free while living, suddenly a recognition that no, it's not the traffic, it's me being unhappy with what it is.
Yes. The problem is located with me. I am no longer being wise.
Because once you accept whatever form Ishvara is, a traffic jam, whatever, once you're accepting and receiving of that, all of the fighting and rejecting and resisting of that, which causes all this, which is the initiation of the suffering, that just disappears.
Yes. You see, what's really interesting is that you know how he says that the practice of yoga is sameness, remaining the same in the front of changing experiences. Now, you can't do that unless you understand what it means to be relaxed in the lap of Ishvara. It's not possible, first of all. Secondly, the important thing is this whole question of how do I see my life in the right light? You see, when we look at our life in the light of Vedanta, it's a very revealing light. You see, if my spouse does something I don't like, or someone does something I don't like, and I find myself being upset, without the light of Vedanta, I cannot help but feel that they've made me upset.
They've hurt you.
Yes, and the problem is with them. Then I have to obsessively change them.
Which is not the location of the problem.
Completely not the location of the problem. That's a terrible thing that Swami Dayananda says, that the problem is ours. The problem is located with us.
Well, it's very fortunate that it is us being a suffering person or being a resisting, rejecting person, because if it wasn't like for that, there is no solution.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, you see, in the light of Vedanta, suddenly I see, I recognize I am being unhappy. I'm recognizing I'm being unwise, or I'm being subjective, or I'm being other than what I am. So I can recognize this now through the teaching. So it becomes a way of seeing for me. And then I can shift back, because there's an epistemological rule. If you know what, you know how. If you know what it means to rest in the lap of Ishvara, you know how.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
And it's not, you don't think yourself to that.
No. Because it's the appreciation of just simply it is being this attitude that is born out of the understanding that everything here is the presence of God.
Can I just cover something about what you mean by living the wisdom?
Yep.
Like, by living the wisdom, that's living this attitude where I'm abiding, resting in the lap of Ishvara, and I'm being what Swami Dayananda praises very often. I'm being a conscious, appreciative, non-demanding person.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Doesn't mean I know everything.
No.
Because I'm always limited in my knowledge, whatever. But because I am being this basic, conscious, non-demanding person,
yes,
I have a learning mind. My faculties are unfettered, because they're unfettered in the sense of there isn't this pressure of needing, which causes confusion in the mind of I need to look good in other people's eyes. I need to get this outcome so I can be happy. There's not all this. So you're actually free to be alive to facts.
Yes.
We're not talking about something which is unshakable, because we're talking about karma yoga. But without this initial understanding of learning what it means to be peaceful and relaxed in yourself, being at home with yourself, there's no way. This is a very high halfway point.
What Swami Dayananda says is that you develop a contemplative disposition. In other words, you have a disposition to be with yourself as yourself. You have an inclination to be yourself as yourself and comfortable in yourself. And this enables that. You see, he has a very interesting psychological principle, which I found very, very interesting, and it was this: is that the basis of reaction is non-acceptance of a fact. Now, every form of suffering he saw as a psychological reaction. So when there's resistance of any kind, you have reaction. You literally become a suffering person. Your sense of identity is myself as a suffering person, and I hate it. So the self-dissatisfaction. Also the insecurity, because there's no sameness.
Yeah.
So this living the wisdom is extremely important. Now, what's wonderful about this is this. At any one time, you're always doing something.
Yeah.
Now, so what happens is we want to do what we're doing with this attitude. Informally, it's called performance of action with proper attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to do what we're doing with this attitude. Now, this means that we can really live. There's no time where we can't live this wisdom. So we wake up and we're lying in bed. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we're lying in bed with this attitude. We then get up. And you see, what happens is that when we're simply doing what we're doing with this attitude, we're shifted out of the subjectivity. We don't have to try and deal with the problems. What we're just doing is we're actually living wholeheartedly for the first time, really.
I like that expression of wholeheartedly, because it really means the body, the mind, the heart is fully engaged in what you're doing.
Fully engaged in what you're doing. But you're not doing any of the staying in the now business.
No, because what we're talking about living our lives consciously, which means doing things consciously in our lives, which means being alive to facts, but we don't decide that we're going to live it consciously. It's born of the recognition of what Ishvara is.
Now, that's an interesting point.
Allowing the mind to be full of the presence of what Ishvara is, which is in whatever form he's taking.
Yeah, how Swami Dayananda puts it, we're alive to facts by being ourself. And we're not being ourself unless we're living in Ishvara's world, which is just simply the presence of what is here. It's not possible.
No.
But the whole meaning of our experience changes once we understand what Ishvara is, because we can just turn to anything and simply become aware of it. And when we're aware of a chair, for example, do you know what I mean? We're just simply, we receive the presence of reality in the form of a chair into our life. We find ourselves being relaxed and being secure. We remain, this is the basis of remaining the same. And the thing is that, but then we have to live this sameness. We have to remain the same in the front of changing experiences.
And we're not deciding to remain the same. It's through the recognition of what Ishvara is.
It's not the result of thinking.
No.
It's the result of an appreciation of ourself, an entirely different appreciation of ourself that becomes evident when we understand what Swami Dayananda means by God.
Yes, yes, yes.
And this really is an extraordinary thing. We'll go more into it next time, but I just wanted to lay the foundation that when living the wisdom becomes the context of our life, that my whole interest is to learn about and be committed to what does it mean to be secure and be at home with myself while living, which is what they mean by moksha, being free while living. When that becomes my interest and I understand what that means, what happens is that I then start to see my unhappiness in the right light. This is when I can see my unhappiness in the right light. If I'm unhappy, it is not my wife, it is not the circumstances, it's not my mind. I've ceased to be wise. I've ceased to be myself. And this is such an important thing, this recognition of what we are, what we really are, as opposed to what we seem to have been, this chopping and changing insecure individual, right?
So we take ourselves to be our thoughts and feelings, and we don't recognize the being that we can, when we're actually being conscious, being ourselves, we're not out,
That's a very interesting point. Swami Dayananda says the whole purpose of Vedanta is to show us that we are more than our thoughts and sensations and feelings. You see, what happens is when we are being thoughts, we're just being thoughts, and then we're being sensations. Oh, I'm cold. Or we're being emotions. I'm angry.
That is our world at that point.
That is our world. But not only that, that's what we think. That's all we are. But when we come to appreciate ourselves in this entirely different way, we find that we are more than those thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We find an abidingness in a sense. Does that make sense? For what it means to be. And this meaning that's recognized and we can abide in shows us very clearly that what we are is because this remains the same. What's changing is the sensations and the thoughts and the feelings. But so this is the key thing. But what I wanted to talk about today is that the wisdom is very, very important. We need to know what we're doing in Vedanta. What is our end? But it's not just simply we listen to the teacher in class and then that's over. What happens is that we have this recognition in the first instance of what it means to be relaxed in the lap of Ishvara, or what it means to be a conscious individual as opposed to a mindless, dramatizing psychological entity, which we normally are. And then to be able to live our life as this conscious individual, as a preparation for the final thing, which my teacher Atmaprakashananda says, the resolution of individuality in totality. That's one step further. But that's all I wanted to go on about today. Okay?
Yep. Thanks, Bede.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Bye-bye.